Edita, Falterota Gintarsha, and Dasu Ekal, and I'm absolutely delighted you're in your new portfolio because you're somebody I have a lot of respect for. You wear your heart in your sleeve and you give everything 100%, and God knows we need that for rural Ireland. Also, as my colleague Senator Gallagher mentioned, you are from rural Ireland. You're from Westport, which has been one of the leading lights in relation to Ireland and small towns in Ireland from a tourism perspective, and people working together. And actually, 2 and 2 makes a lot more than 4 in Westport and what you've achieved. And even this year, you had a Westport Entrepreneur of the Year who will be representing Ireland in the World Entrepreneur of the Year next May. And that's another significant achievement. Congratulations. I feel very, very positive about rural Ireland. Not least, Minister, because you're in that role. You understand it. You know really what it's about. Having said that, I have a number of concerns. You have a significant challenge. Like in employment, 27% of households in Ireland lost more than one person through immigration in the past 7 years or so. In urban, it was less than half that. In 2006 to 2011, rural unemployment increased by 192%. And as Senator Gallagher said, we do have a two-tiered economy, and I know you effectively mentioned that in your document, in your presentation. And I know if anyone are going to give it their best shot to help actually realign that, I know you will, and certainly you'll have my support, and I'm sure the support of everybody in this House. SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses. 80% of all the small and medium-sized businesses that closed between 2006 and 2011, 80%, 4 of every 5 of them, were in rural Ireland. So, what's the situation? There's been lots of plans and lots of strategies, and I see there's a 3-year strategy here now with 227 key objectives. From my perspective, which is a limited perspective, I admit, there are a couple of fundamental issues. One is there's no joint-up thinking. Céidigh report mentioned that back 7 or 8 years ago at this stage. Also, various departments seem to be working in a silo effect. And I know, Minister, and you mentioned it at the beginning of your speech, it is your sincere effort to start creating joint-up thinking and get rid of the silo effect and actually knock down the barriers. But looking at what happened, if we do what we always did, we're going to get what we always got, a second-class and a second-tier society in rural Ireland. So, what's needed? In my view, there's effective, balanced investment. And it's not necessarily just purely throwing more money at something. It's how effective the existing expenditure is. And what's the return to the communities, as you say, and return to Ireland Inc. for the investment that's been made. Like, for example, the IDA, for every job they create, they spend 4 times the amount of money that's given to Údarás na Gaeltachta. 400% of what Údarás na Gaeltachta get, who directly and indirectly, through their support to communities and businesses in the Gaeltacht area, employ 7,500 people. Another key area that's been referred to, and you also referred to it, Minister, is housing. I think we really need to address that. There are problems, and it's been highlighted very, very strongly in relation to housing in Dublin and some of the other major cities in Ireland. But there are also significant housing problems in rural Ireland. People are finding it almost impossible to get planning permission on sites that they have or their parents and grandparents or relatives have. So I really believe that that should be coordinated and saying, how can we allow people from rural Ireland to actually build a house or create an extension to where they live already? Surely people have to be number one. So they do. And I know there has to be a balance between people and environment, and I feel very strongly about that too. But I think that issue needs to be challenged. And quite frankly, Minister, I know you have the passion and the ability and the motivation to go and do that. I mentioned about jobs. One of the greatest successes we have is the Wild Atlantic Way. And I know, Minister, you were involved and you were very actively involved in that a number of years ago. And it was your and others' inspiration that actually helped create that. And that works well in the west of Ireland, really well. But what about the rest of rural Ireland? So that's just from a tourism perspective. I think we need to look at what type of industries fit what region best and how can we develop those clusters in those regions. Like what was done in tourism in the Wild Atlantic Way, which, Minister, you were very instrumental and active in developing and creating. Because it's not the same that will work in Connemara as will work in Monaghan, for example, or in Donegal, or in Clare. You mentioned innovation hubs. Last January, I brought together 4 innovation hubs, including Ludgate, to the AAV room here. And the purpose of that, Minister, was to show TDs and senators what innovation does and what it can achieve. And we had quite a number of attendees at that. But really what I wanted was the TDs and senators to go back to their hometowns and to work with Ludgate, to work with Portershed, to work with those who are willing to do it and say, how do I create one of those in Westport? How do I create one of those in Castleblaney? How do I create one of those in Ennis? Because we can be leaders in our community to help support you in creating a better rural Ireland. And I hope to do that again next January, February, and I'll be looking for support across the House for attendance and support of that. In 2016, 44% of all the start-ups in Ireland happened in Dublin. And that's the trend continuously. Whereas 40% of the population are in rural Ireland. You mentioned broadband. There's 2 factors here. One is availability, and connected to availability is speed. And take my own county, Galway. 53% of the population of Galway have broadband, whereas in Dublin it's 99%. And Galway would be seen as a pretty large city in a pretty large area, 3rd largest city in Ireland. So there is a lot of work to be done there, but it needs the motivation and drive and initiative, Minister, that I know you have and that we'll support you in relation to it. There's already mentioned about schools. Just one little thing in relation to nursing homes. There's a huge difference here. If there's a nursing home in Dublin, the payment for a nursing home NTPF rate is in the region of 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 euros. But if you look at Mayo, the NTPF rate for Mayo, your county minister, is in the region of 750 to 800 euros. I can't understand why there's 60–70% of a gap from that perspective. And that's where I mean, where we need to have total joined-up thinking. And, Minister, I wholeheartedly support you. I'm absolutely delighted you're in this role because I'm passionate about it. And if any person can achieve results, you will.